Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lead Like a Legend webinar. My name is Libby Ratu, and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. The webinar will be presented by Mary Engel from University of Toronto Beta Psi Chapter. Our goal is to talk about management styles and learn some leadership skills that will help you in the workplace and in life. Before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. On the right side of your screen, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. The viewer window will display the presenter's screen when the webinar begins. The control panel can be minimized or expanded by clicking on the horizontal double arrow button in the upper left-hand corner. Minimizing the panel allows better view of the presentation. So it's a little red button right at the top. There are a few features of the control panel that you should know about. First, be familiar with the raise your hand button. The button's located along the left side of the control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you have a question or if you want to respond to a question being asked by Mary. Click this button now to raise your hand. Let's just practice real quick. There we go. Awesome. And clicking again will lower your hand. Another important feature for you to know about in the control panel is the questions pane. To submit a question, type it in the box. There may be questions related to the presentation, or if you're having technical issues, please make sure to write them in there related to the GoToWebinar system. You may be also asked by Mary to type your ideas or responses here as an exercise during the webinar. You can write a quick note in there now if you'd like, just to practice if you are new to our webinar system. Questions may be submitted at any time. They'll be monitored and we'll respond to them quickly when we have time in between the presentation. So also if you have a question about clarifying something during the webinar, you may be asked to respond to a polling question or survey. Please take time to participate as your input and ideas are valuable to the group and will enhance our webinar tonight. Please make sure to stay attentive and interact as much as possible during the webinar. The quality of your experience depends on your attention and participation. If you need to step away for a moment, please don't close the webinar system window as you will have to log in and rejoin the session. If you experience problems with the audio, one possible solution is to use the conference call number and listen to the presentation on your phone, and then you can view it on your computer screen. This webinar is being recorded, and the online archive will be available to view on the CAPA website in approximately 2 weeks. Does anyone have any questions? Looks like we're good. Mary's going to start with the video, but in the meantime, if you did not receive a handout from her that she emailed out earlier today, if you could please type your email in the question box, and I can email it to you while we're watching the video to start. So again, Mary sent out a handout to go with the webinar tonight, so if you could pull that up and be ready to go. And if you did not receive one, please type your email in the question box, and I can happily send one to you, and so hopefully you'll receive it by the time we finish by the time we finish the video. Okay, so here. All right, we're getting a few in here, Mary, so I'll just get this ready to go.
Okay, are you ready for me to start, Libby?
I am, so it looks like only 2 people. I'm just going to send this right now, so I'm ready to go.
All right, here we go.
Is there sound, Mary? Because I'm not hearing it.
There is. Can you ask the others if they're hearing sound?
Can people hear the video sound? No, other people are not able to hear it either.
Whoop. Okay, let me try this. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. Put yourself on mute.
Myself, I can. Yeah. Give me one moment.
It was the best thing that could have ever happened. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about it. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life.
You are joining me for Lead Like a Legend. We are going to cover the 3 essential rules that will help you increase your influence as a manager. So we're going to be here for the next 50 minutes, and I'm going to be sharing with you some neat stories and some rather interesting topics that you probably aren't going to hear in any other kind of leadership webinar or seminar. These are some ideas that I put together over my last 10 years as a consultant in management and a coach, and it's really based on the observations that I've made of the people that I've worked with and the legendary leaders that I've read about. Just to give you an idea of who I am, this is me and my family. This is us a couple of years ago, just before I got married to the wonderful gentleman on the right over there. And those are my beautiful 2 stepdaughters. And we live here in Oakville, Ontario, Canada, which is about 45 minutes outside of Toronto, which is where I grew up and where I went to school and where I became a Kappa and all that great stuff. And speaking of leading like a legend, I think one of the things that that inspires me is the ingenuity that comes from the innocence of youth. And I just want to share an example with you. So I was chatting with my older stepdaughter, and she is now 14, so she's a couple years older than what you see here in the picture. And we were in the car, and we were listening to the radio, and she goes, there's this new song playing, and it's all the rage, and she goes, yeah, that's an old song. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the first time I've heard this song. How is it old? Well, my brilliant stepdaughter has realized that if she looks at the top 100 chart on Billboard or wherever she gets her charts, she can start listening to song number 100 and be so ahead of the crowd and be such a trendsetter that she will literally be sick of a song by the time I'm tapping my foot to it. So I have no doubt that I have a leader on my hands because she will forever be ahead of the pack. Let's talk about legends. So here are just a few examples of the people that we're talking about. We all know that these people are leaders. Leaders in their field, leaders in industry, leaders in politics. They're leaders. We all see them as leaders, and they tend to be leaders that we admire. And so what I set out to do was figure out what is it that these leaders have in common, and more importantly, how can we emulate them? And so often what happens is we separate ourselves from these leaders to such an extent that we almost make it seem impossible. And here's something that I've learned about leadership and becoming an authentic leader. And I want you to write these 3 words down wherever you have a pen and paper. The way you achieve authenticity in leadership is first emulate, then integrate, and then authenticate. So you're going to emulate the behaviors that you see in other leaders that you admire. You're going to integrate those behaviors into the behaviors you've already developed and the skills and styles that you've already created for yourself. And once you've integrated them, you're going to make them your own. You're going to authenticate. And that's going to become the new authentic you. And when you do that, and the more often you do that, the more likely you are to become what's known as a legendary leader. So in this workshop, we are going to reveal the 3 rules that create inescapable influence for you in leadership. We are also going to cover a really interesting topic around the power behind powerful questions. And then we're going to talk about how you can implement your influence starting tomorrow by engaging your employees or anybody else that you are leading. There are a few things we will not be covering in this workshop, and so I just want you to prepare you for that right at the start here. So we cannot cover everything there is to know about management and being a great leader. It is a huge topic, and millions of trees have been killed writing books about it. So there's no way I can do that in 50 minutes. But I will let you know where to find additional resources. I cannot cover in this short 50 minutes how to give effective performance feedback and have difficult conversations with people. But for that, what I will point you towards is another webinar that I did, which is called Painless Performance Feedback. And if you want a specific webinar around performance feedback and how to have difficult conversations, then I would encourage you to send me an email, and I will send you the link to that particular workshop. My email address is mary@themanagementcoach.com. What I also cannot do in this workshop is teach you how to control people who are annoying you. If I could do that, I'd be a billionaire. And lo, I have not cracked that code yet. However, I have figured out how you can influence others by managing yourself. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. We will have the opportunity at the end of this webinar for open Q&A, and you can ask me any question about management that we haven't answered in this workshop and that I have the time to answer. And for those of you who are here, we will have a special gift for everybody on the webinar, but you will have to stick around because I will be presenting it later in the webinar. So if you're all ready to get started, I am going to reveal to you rule number 1, an essential rule for being able to influence the people you work with, and that is inspired by some of our legendary leaders. Legendary leaders have an almost mystical or spiritual connection to their work, and they live a life of purpose. So you may have heard of Mahatma Gandhi. And Gandhi led India to independence and inspired all kinds of movements around the world for civil rights based on nonviolent civil disobedience. And if you look up the definition of the word Mahatma, you'll see that it represents high-souled or venerable. And so one thing I've realized about all of these legendary leaders is that they do have a spiritual connection to their work and to their innermost desires. If you look at Oprah Winfrey, if you look at Madonna, if you look at Steve Jobs, if you look at Gandhi, Mandela, any of these legendary leaders are answering to an inner, stronger power. Some people might call it a higher power, and depending on your spiritual beliefs, you might have a different definition of what that is. But to these people, they were living a life of purpose. They talk about meditation, they talk about yoga, they talk about keeping journals. Even Donald Trump spends 4 hours a day just in personal reflection. And so for these leaders, it is about connecting what they do every day with their highest values and being so introspective that they're so attuned to those values that it makes a difference when they communicate with the rest of the world. And so when I'm working with my clients, this is where we start. We start every coaching conversation in working to connect you with your highest values and then show you how everything that you do and every challenge that you experience is serving you exactly how you need it to so you can reach your goals. And then when you're connected with your highest values and you see how every challenge is designed perfectly to bring you closer to those values and closer to those aspirations, then you can disconnect and disengage and not get entangled in conflict. And so you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, this is big stuff, Mary. This is like, we're talking about legendary leaders. That sounds really hard. And the truth is, it's not really that hard. And I do it with my clients all the time. So when we say life of purpose, we're talking about why are you here? What is the impact and contribution that you're meant to make in this world? And you have two possible scenarios. The first is that you're here to experience a personal growth journey and that you're going to be learning and experiencing challenges and overcoming them and constantly evolving yourself. The second possible scenario is that you're here to impact humanity and that you have been born into this world with the skills and attributes and essentials needed to have an impact in that way. And the impact can show up in 7 different levels of expression. Sorry about the typo. 7 levels of expression. So when you think about your purpose or the meaning that you have in life, the first level is the self, that you are here for yourself to create a journey to develop your own spirit. The second is that you are on a mission for your family, and that what brings you meaning and what gives you purpose is the contribution and impact that you have on your family. Third is community. And a lot of us, especially Kappas, get to experience that firsthand because we belong to a community. And we're encouraged to participate in community. Fourth is at the state or provincial level. So we're looking within your country at the smaller organizations that are the jurisdiction where you live. Fifth is the country. Maybe you're here to have an impact on your country, the citizenship at a broader level. Sixth is a world impact. You're here to impact people all over the world in every country. And seventh is a universal impact. You're here to change the energy of the universe and to have a very deep and profound contribution. And when I think of universal impact, I think of people like Stephen Hawking, right, and the work that he does. And I think of astronomers, and I think of NASA. I mean, these are people that are reaching beyond the boundaries of the world to create leadership that is universal. What I want you to do is disconnect your purpose from your career path. So a lot of people get confused. Career is how you express your purpose. It is not in itself your purpose. And everybody has a purpose. And the behaviors that you use to express your purpose are determined by your values. So when you live a life of purpose, you're going to resonate higher when you live that life consistently with your values. Now, let me define values for you for a moment, because a lot of people aren't always sure what I'm talking about when I'm speaking about values. These are the things that you hold in highest regard: loyalty, sisterhood, love, friendship. For some people, it's money. For some people, it's career. For some people, it's family. Everybody has a different set of values. The value, for example, of a diamond is higher than the value of a sapphire, unless, of course, you're a Kappa. And the values in your spiritual sense work the same way. There is a hierarchy. These are the things that you must honor, or you'll feel incomplete or dead inside or overwhelmed. And the reason I raise this in this workshop is because when it comes to influence, you must be concerned with two sets of values. The first set is your own, and the second set of values are the people that you're trying to influence. So I want to do just a little exercise here. And on a sheet of paper, I want you to list out 3 moments. No, first you're going to list out 3 values that you hold in high regard. So 3 of your highest values, just write them out. And I'll give you a moment to do that. So for example, 3 of my highest values are love, efficiency, and loyalty. And now I want you to write down the 3 lowest points in your life, the 3 biggest struggles you've had where you just felt angry or frustrated or alone, the 3 lowest points in your life. Take a moment to write those down. Times were really bad. And for me, those would be, one of them would be when I found out my brother had schizophrenia. Another would be when my heart was broken in a relationship. So these are a couple of examples of the lowest points in my life. And now I want you to draw a line connecting each value to the challenge that spurred it. So I want you to notice that values are generated by voids. Your lowest points in your life are the voids, the times you were missing something. And the values come directly from those moments. And your values are constantly evolving. Every time you experience another void, you're going to experience a new value. So here's the deal. When you disconnect from your own values, you feel overwhelmed, you feel chaos, and you feel lost. But when you disconnect from other people's values, you create distance and isolation. And this is, you may have heard this before. This is why they say marry someone who shares your values. Because when you can communicate in the form of somebody else's values, you can create a stronger relationship. So if you want to influence the people that you're leading, there are basically 4 steps. Because people will change when it's in their best interest to do so, you have to connect with their values. So first of all, in your handout, I've given you a spot to record some of the answers to these questions. I want you to identify one person that you want to influence. It could be a colleague, it could be somebody that works for you, it could be a chapter member, somebody that you want to influence. And for question number 2, I want you to write down, what are some of his or her values? What do they seem to care about most? And then I want you to think about, what do you want them to do, say, or think? And then finally, how can you communicate it in terms of their values? So my old boss used to call it listener train of thought. And if you're not speaking in terms of the other person's values, they will filter what you have to say. So while you're working on that, let's use an example that I think we can all relate to. So I want you all, as you're thinking about the answers to these questions, I want you all to go to the chat box or the question box, and I want you to type in your answer to this question. How many of you are in a relationship? You just type in me or I am. How many of you are in a relationship? Type your answer. Libby, I can't see the answers, so if you can guide me, that would be great.
Sorry, I realized I was still muted. Talking to myself. It looks like most people who've answered are in relationships. We have quite a few who are single and hopefully loving it. Also, and people who are, we have one person who's in a relationship with himself, which is so admirable. I think that is wonderful. Thank you, Gloria, for your fun answer.
That's a great answer. All right. Those of you who are in a relationship, how many of you feel like a leader in your relationship? Say, I do, or me.
People are saying sometimes other people do feel like they're a leader. I am in a relationship as well, so I'll put in my two. I feel like I'm the leader in our relationship. Someone said they feel like it's more of a partnership, which is also good.
Yeah, that's fair. You can certainly have a couple of leaders in your relationship.
Yes.
Well, here's what legendary leaders do. They communicate in terms of the other person's values. And so if I were going to use an example of myself, I'm in a relationship. I have a loving husband. And when I'm trying to influence him, I look for the things that he values. So he values building things, creativity, efficiency, and of course the one single thing that all men value, and you all know what I'm talking about, food. Right? So here is an example of how to influence him to cook. Sweetheart, the grocery store is on my way home, so I'll pick up the groceries for a beautiful stuffed chicken dinner, which I know you love to eat. Now, strategically thinking, he also knows that I can't make that dish. He says, great. Then he arrives home saying, stay out of the kitchen, I got this. Okay, so what happened here? Was it efficient? Yes, he values efficiency. I got the groceries on my way home, which was efficient. I'm not going out of my way. He's not going out of his way. Creative? Is he building something? Absolutely. He's in the kitchen. He's working with his hands. He's building something that makes him feel good. He's contributing. Food? Check. Yep, we got that. And then to seal the deal, of course, a little snuggling after dinner, and we are positioned to influence again the next time. Okay? So very simply, if you can identify your partner's values, your employees' values, your peers' values, whoever you are trying to influence, if you can identify their values and communicate with them in a way that lets them see that it is in their best interest to do what you're asking, then you will get to see change. So before we go on to rule number 2, Libby, I just want to open it up for any questions on this topic. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Any questions or reactions or comments about what we've covered so far?
Looks like we're good, Mary. We're good to go to question number 2.
All right, cool. Rule number 2, your biggest problems aren't academic, they're energetic. And in this rule, we're talking about conflict and chaos. And conflict and chaos come from 2 different types of resistance, interpersonal resistance and internal resistance. I will explain to you a little bit about what those mean. Internal resistance, first of all, is what creates chaos in your life. And when you are trying to lead at a higher level than you have been accustomed to, you will start to create chaos in your world because it will be outside of your comfort zone. Now, for this webinar, I don't want to go into too much detail around internal resistance because we actually did a webinar on this last year called Inner Freedom. I believe it's probably still on the website. And you can also email me about this webinar. I can send you the link. It is about managing your own internal resistance so that you can come at a situation with more freedom and flexibility and neutrality. What I want to focus on here is interpersonal resistance, because that is really where leadership seems to hit a snag a lot of the time. So some information you might find interesting around interpersonal resistance and conflict is this. The HeartMath Institute in San Francisco is an organization that studies the energy of the heart. And they have discovered that your heart emits an energy that can be measured a few feet away from your body. They've also learned through neuroscience that your heart and various organs in the center of your body actually hold memories and hold stresses that were conditioned in you all the way from the time you were conceived right up through your life through adolescence. And so what happens is the energy that's being emitted by your heart can actually be measured and read by the person who might be standing within 2 feet of you. And so what's going on is this subconscious exchange of information. It's a subconscious exchange of old wounds and conditioning and resentments and anger that you are not consciously aware of. And that is what creates conflict and harmony. If you are resonating with that person to a certain degree, you might experience harmony. This is somebody that you really like, you might want to spend a lot of time with. If your energy is in conflict, then you might experience conflict with that person. So going back to the example of spouses and relationships. So every now and then, I might get into a small argument with my spouse. And I remember one time in particular where we were, he was in our room and he said, I can't remember exactly, we were arguing about something that one of our daughters did. And I came into the room and he said, I'm stressed out, and he got really angry and really irate and was just so stressed. And I came in, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this. So my exact response was, you're not the only one who's stressed, you know. And my maturity dropped 25 years in 2.5 seconds. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when we are in conflict and when we are angry at somebody, we behave like we are 5-year-olds. And so what does that mean for your team and your business and wherever you are working as a leader? It means that if you've got conflict, then that team is being run by children. Because what's happening is that undercurrent of energy is taking hold and is superseding the rational adult mind that you would hope would come to play in that moment. And so what that brings us to is, how do you manage in those situations? In particular, how do you manage when you're the one in conflict? And so I turned to one of my mentors, a man by the name of Dr. Bill Redden, who was a guru in management. And he says that management of others is really about self-management. And so you'll recall at the beginning, I still have not figured out how to control other people that are annoying you. But what I have figured out how to do is stop being so annoyed. And that is about self-management. And usually where I start with people is with the self. How do you create a neutrality in yourself that allows you to transcend that childlike reaction in the state of conflict and come at situations with more poise and greater influence? I'm going to take you through a little exercise here. And if you turn in your handout, if you've got it available, you can follow along here and take notes. There are 4 questions that you're going to ask yourself so that you can neutralize your energy in situations of conflict. The first question I want you to ask is, I want you to pick a person who you might be in conflict with, or who maybe has been annoying you recently or making you angry. And I want you to ask yourself what that person's problem is, and then write it down. So question number 1 is, what is the person's problem? And I'm going to give you about a minute to just think that through and write it down. So to give you an example as you're writing, I had a client who was having an interpersonal conflict with one of his peers. And I asked him, well, what's that person's problem? And he said, well, that person keeps throwing me under the bus. It's disrespectful, and I don't like it. He keeps going and telling our manager on things that he thinks I've done that are wrong. He didn't like it. So question number 2 is, what advice do you want to give that person? So look at the problem, and question number 2, what advice do you want to give that person? Write down your answer. I'll give you another minute to answer that. And if you're struggling with it, I'll give you the example of my client. The advice he wanted to give his peer was, don't throw me under the bus, just come to me and talk to me about it. Now, third question is the hardest part, because this is where the shift really occurs. This is where you come into self-management. You've got to ask yourself, in what part of your life or in what way are you guilty of doing the same? In what way are you guilty of having that person's same problem? I want you to think hard about this, because this is the hardest question to answer. There is always an answer. I've been doing this for 4 years. I know there's always an answer. So in the case of my client, he was really, really resistant to answer this question. I mean, really hard on himself. He was just, there's no way, I don't throw anybody under the bus. It's just not possible. Now, I knew for a fact that this was not true. So I asked him, I said, do you mean to tell me you have never gone to your boss and complained to him about any of your peers? And he looked at me and was like, oh. Oh. And he realized that, in fact, he was so angry at the other person for doing the exact same thing that he was guilty of doing. And the moment you realize that is the moment that you gain neutrality, because you own the same behavior and you become humble. And humility is one of the characteristics of all of the legendary leaders. Now, step 4. You ask yourself, how does the advice in question 2 apply to you? And give yourself the same advice, and you do it. So in this example, my client would say to himself, all right, stop throwing my peer under the bus. Go talk to him about what's troubling me. Now, why did I take you through this exercise? The reason is because you can be a greater influence when people feel it is safe to communicate with you, and people will feel it's safe to communicate with you because your emotions are in control. And the purpose of this exercise is to bring your emotions under control. All right, I'm going to carry on to the next section in the interest of time. And we're going to talk about rule number 3. Legendary leaders have undeniable conviction that people can change. Let's use an example. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs and the iPod. Everyday people will use iPods and will be willing to buy a 99-cent song without the packaging and without the rest of the album. And the music industry can and will adapt. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this story, but back in the day, the music industry was not so willing to adapt. It meant losing a lot of control. But Steve Jobs had such undeniable conviction that those people could change. They could change their minds. He had to use some extreme influence to make it happen, but it happened. And now we all walk around with telephones that carry thousands of songs, and we carry them in our pocket. The notion that people can't change is one of the biggest fallacies that I see in business. And so I want to give you a tool that is perfectly designed to create change in people in a way that will allow you to express your influence and create the change that you want to create. And keep in mind, change is really about vision. So if you're going to create influence, it's got to be influence towards something. So you've got to have a vision. You've got to have a destination that you want people to get to. And then you've got to ask powerful questions that will help people get to that destination on their own. Powerful questions are the ability to ask questions that reveal the information needed for maximum benefit to the person or the team. And it requires a couple of things. First of all, it requires you to be listening actively. The ability to focus completely on what the person is not saying in addition to what they are saying. To understand the meaning of what is being said in the context of the person's desires and values. And then to support that self-expression. It requires a set of questions, the actual questions that you could ask. And I have put those in your handout for you. 51 powerful questions that you can ask that would allow you to increase your influence. It requires silence, the ability for you to stay silent while the other person thinks about their answer. The ability for you to relish silence. And when you ask powerful questions, and you listen between the lines and you share the insights that you're hearing, you keep doing that until you spark a new awareness for the person, something that they have not realized about themselves. So I don't know how many of you remember this cartoon, Speedy Gonzalez, constantly running, and his therapist here is asking a powerful question. What are you running from? That's really important. It's finding out things that are not being said so that you can bring them into people's awareness. And when people create awareness, they start to understand how it is that they can change. Three reasons for powerful questions: to awaken new understanding, to hear what's not being said, and the most important thing that this does, especially when you're trying to influence change, is that it creates new neural connections in the brain that actually physically, chemically, and behaviorally cause people to change. So I mentioned to you guys that there's going to be a very special bonus in this webinar, and I'm going to present that to you now. So what I want to do for everybody here is make myself available for a free strategy session, because I realize that, you know, I'm going through all of this content really quickly and trying to get out as much of this knowledge to you as I can in the limited time that we have. It is a lot of information. You probably feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. And it's just too much to absorb in just 50 minutes. So what I wanted to do was make available to each of you 30 minutes so that we could have a one-on-one conversation about whatever it is that you're experiencing in your leadership role right now. And so to do that, I've made available in my calendar a number of sessions over the next week. You just have to go to www.themanagementcoach.com/free strategy session. The website is live right now, and you go in there and you just book the time that you want. That's it. And we're going to get on a call, and we're going to chat, and we're going to create a strategy for you to increase your influence in whatever team that you are leading. So hopefully you guys find that useful. I know that you know, I do this with a number of people after webinars that I host or present, and they're always mind-boggling and meaningful and transformative. So I would encourage all of you to go ahead and book that free slot when you have a chance. And on top of that, it gives you, if you have never tried coaching before, if you've never worked with a coach before, it gives you an experience. It gives you that wisdom of knowing what is it like to work with a coach, okay? So go ahead, www.themanagementcoach.com/free strategy session, and I'll be talking to you soon. Before we get into Q&A, I promised you one last piece of information, which is how do you bring all of this together so that you can implement your influence first thing tomorrow morning when you are back at the office or back in your team trying to create the change that you're seeing, that you want to see. So over my last 10 years, facilitating meetings and consulting businesses and coaching managers, I have boiled it down to 3 essential steps to engage employees and influence broad change. And I'm going to share those 3 steps with you now. These are million-dollar steps. Like, these are the things that create multi-million-dollar companies. This is how it works. The first thing you want to do is communicate the change that you want to see. And in that communication, you're going to write back to our rule number 1, which is life of purpose, know your values, know the values of the people that you're speaking with, communicate in a way that is authentic to your values, but use words that are authentic to their values. Communicate the change that you want. Step number 2, let the employees absorb the change. Absorbing the change is critical, and we never give it enough time. The bigger the change, the more time is required to let employees absorb the change. And what does that look like? If you're going to communicate a change, and it takes you 10 minutes to communicate the change that you want, you've got to allow 50 minutes for Q&A. You've got to give people the chance to ask questions, express reactions, raise objections, express concerns. Any reaction, you've got to get them to vocalize. That allows them to absorb the change. The more they can talk about it, the more they can express their reactions to it, their emotions around it, the more absorption you create, because it allows you to address those objections early and allows them to absorb it faster. The third step, and this one is also most often overlooked, is you've got to let the employees shape the change. So shaping the change is really about asking powerful questions. Asking powerful questions that say, okay, how will you go about implementing this change? What tools do you need? What would your organization look like if this change were to be implemented? And you give them time to think about the answer and relish in the silence. What's happening in that silence is the new neural connections are taking hold, and they are transforming the way they are thinking about your change. Those are the 3 fundamental steps to engaging employees. That is how you increase your influence as a manager using the 3 essential rules. We're going to emulate through the legendary leaders that we've observed, and then act on them using these 3 fundamental steps to engaging employees. And there is space in your handout to record those 3 fundamental steps. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment and give you a chance to write those down. Communicate the change you want, let employees absorb the change, and then let your employees shape the change. And shaping the change can sometimes take a day, sometimes it takes an hour. Whatever time it takes, shaping the change means that your employees are going to have an action plan that they develop themselves, that say these are the steps and the timelines by which we are going to create this change. And that's how you create engaged employees. So that's it, guys. Those are the 3 rules that create inescapable influence, the power behind powerful questions, and how you're going to implement your influence starting tomorrow morning. We have, it looks like, about 6 minutes to take questions, and at this point, all questions are welcome. Anything about the content or anything else that you have questions about, consider it open Q&A with Coach Mary. Anything you want to know, I am here to answer. So just type those in, or you can even raise your hand, actually, and Libby will put you on the microphone, and we'll just take your questions live.
We do have a question of just, can you repeat rule number 2, please? Rebecca missed that one.
Yes, I sure can. Rule number 2, go back there. Your biggest problems aren't academic, they're energetic. And what I mean by that is it's really internal energy that's creating chaos and conflict. And those are your biggest problems. And if you try to address them academically through logic or rationale or books or training, you're going to miss the mark. I've seen it over and over again. That kind of stuff will go over people's heads when you're trying to battle with their subconscious mind. Subconscious is not wired to receive academic training to resolve conflict and chaos. You've got to get to the energetic aspects and understand that it starts with your energy, and then it goes through the interpersonal aspects of understanding what are people's values, how do you communicate to those values so that you create an energetic connection to the change that you want. Other questions? I know some of you have questions that you popped into the registration form, so if you want to ask those questions, I am happy to tackle some of them. I know we didn't cover everything in this webinar, but we covered certainly the elements of legendary leadership that I think are key when it comes to management, certainly with the companies that I've worked with.
Okay, Catherine Simard has a question. Catherine, I'm going to put you on speaker so that you can ask your question live. Here we go. Catherine, you are unmuted now.
Great. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Catherine. Yeah, Kim.
Hi. Thank you for putting me on microphone. You said that it takes 10 minutes to communicate change, and then you said how long do we have to leave for people to absorb the change?
So if it takes you 10 minutes to communicate a change, so let's say you're doing a presentation and you're saying this is the change that we want to see, here are the action steps that we want to see taken, and this is the outcome we're looking for, right? So let's say it takes you 10 minutes to present all of that information. Then you want to leave 50 minutes, 50 minutes for Q&A and to get people engaged in that change. Now, it might not take the full 50 minutes to get people absorbing that change. However, that's how much time you want to make sure you allow for it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay? And I'll add to that, it's not just giving that time, but it's actually your role as the leader to ask people what their reaction is to the presentation, how do they feel about it, what do they like about it, what do they not like about it, what would they need in place to make it happen tomorrow. So as the leader, it's your role to ask those powerful questions to help people absorb the information that you've presented. It isn't about them asking you questions. It's about you asking them questions and getting the reaction. And then what will happen is as they're starting to absorb the reaction, because you've asked them a powerful question, they will start to uncover the gaps, the things that they're unsure of, the things that they need to know more about, and then they'll start to ask those questions.
Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap things up? We do have a few thank yous, Mary. Suzanne Woodard says, thanks so much. Great information about leadership. And Ann Broadwell this has been very valuable. She would love to listen again and have someone else she'd like to encourage to listen. So hopefully they're spreading the word about this incredible webinar. I loved it.
Thank you.
Catherine says, yes, thank you so much. Wonderful.
Gosh, you guys, thank you. It was awesome presenting it. Thanks for giving me the time. And hopefully I'll be speaking to a bunch of you shortly in your strategy session. If you do want more information, you can go to my website and you can check out the free resources that are there. And also you can find my ebook there. You can download my free ebook as well. So anything that you need in terms of management, that's the place to be.
Great. Well, thank you again to Mary for leading the session, and thank you everyone for your participation today. If you have any questions about today's topic, you may email Mary directly. Mary, is your email up on the screen? Hold on, let me pull that up.
It is not, but it is the website that you see here. Just put Mary at themanagementcoach.com, and you'll find me.
Great. If you'd like to be more involved in CAPA's virtual training and webinar programs, we would love to have you join our producer team. Please contact Karen Holmes at KKG headquarters for details. The benefits are excellent, the opportunity to support CAPA's webinar program, and a front row seat at a great presentation. As we close the webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You'll be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Your feedback with us will help shape future webinar training events. If you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, please send them to Karen Holmes. Her email is kholmes@kkg.org. Again, thank you to everyone. I'm going to close the webinar now. Thank you so much, Mary. I really appreciated your webinar tonight, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.